One of the arguments that I get presented to me whenever I'm debating this topic, or in the comments here, or in the comments of the YouTube channel, is John Schneider hasn't built a good offensive line in 10 years. What makes you think he'll do it now? And I would say this. Mike Macdonald touched on this concept in his press conference today. He said, quote, players are allowed to get better, end quote. And what he meant by that was you can't just judge a football player by what he is today. If coaches did that, they wouldn't coach for very long. They wouldn't have successful careers. Players not only do we have to assume that they can get better, but I think you have to assume in most cases they will. If they have the traits and they have the talent, they have the blueprint to be a good player, and then they're coached up properly and given reps, given meaningful reps and opportunities, they're probably going to get better over time. Well, so can coaches. How many head coaches have we seen and coordinators get fired, learn, as Bryce pointed out, go on and become successful elsewhere? Bill Belichick was once fired as a head coach. And general managers can get better too. And we've seen it, right? How much better have our drafts looked the last 3 years than they did previously? And John talks openly about why that is, some of the specific lessons and mistakes that they made that they learned from. Just because he's been doing it for 15 years doesn't mean that he has his entire philosophy and approach locked down and he's never going to stray from that. Remember 4 years ago when our defensive line was horrible, ineffective, couldn't get any pressure on the quarterback, and they were constantly chasing players, trading for Carlos Dunlap at the deadline, right? Guys like that at the end of their career, you know, bringing Jadeveon Clowney in here at the last minute that year because they had nobody else to rush the passer. You know, the Sheldon Richardson trade, right? They kept doing this over and over again. And it's very similar in the matter that a lot of you really want to diss John for his comment that, you know, guards get overpaid and overdrafted. And then his comment the other day that they don't really take part in big time free agency. Well, he used to feel that way about the defensive line position too. They traded Frank Clark because they didn't want to pay him $20 million a year. But now, 5-6 years later, they paid Leonard Williams. He's learned. And I wonder if he could go back and do that again. If he would have, you know, hindsight being 2020, if he would have held on to Frank Clark instead of, drafting LJ Collier in his place that year. He's learned. There's also a ton of young assets on that offensive line. They're not going to give up on those guys. McDonald made that clear today. They're going to get better. They did get better. That offensive line at the end of the year, worlds better than it was the first half of the year. And I would submit to you that if that offensive line that we had the last 6 weeks was there all year, I think this might have been a much different ballgame. Maybe Ryan Grubb would still have a job. Right? Abraham Lucas yesterday in an exit interview said, I am just now supposed to be fully healing from the surgery I had 12 months ago. And I was able to make it work for 8 games. Now I get to go into the offseason healthy and rehab and get stronger. And he name dropped one guy. He said, do you know who I'm most excited to work out with this offseason? Because I think he can get a lot stronger. And when he does, he's going to be a great player. Christian Haynes. That's who Abe Lucas name dropped. Not Stal Lamea, not Oluwatimi, not Jalen Sundell, not Anthony Bradford, Christian Haynes. Players get better, coaches get better, GMs can get better. And John Schneider's not stupid. He has his ear to the ground. He knows what's being said about him in the organization. He knows that his seat is hotter than it's ever been. And if he doesn't fix this one glaring weakness on the team, he won't have a job anymore. And I can tell you from personal experience, I know this to be a fact. John Schneider wants to spend the entirety of the rest of his NFL career here in Seattle. It's his home now. It's where his family's entrenched, loves it here, loves the organization, never wants to go anywhere else. He's going to do everything he can to try and win another championship and solidify his legacy and his career here. So I say that just because I would like for you all to just be a little bit more optimistic and open-minded, those of you who are leaning towards the more cynical side.